there. I wanted to talk to you today about the possibilities around what could happen for the growth of your podcast if you had, say, an internationally recognized podcast expert take a look at your podcast with the idea of developing diagnostic analysis and strategy around helping your podcast grow and helping your podcast grow your business even more. Well, that's what we do when we do a podcast audit at Produce Your Podcast. And what we're bringing to the table when we are identifying areas for growth, we're not just looking at the production value of your podcast, which is absolutely important, but we're going to look in the podcast audit as a way to how you open the show, how you close the show. But we're also bringing in the business development strategy piece where we're going to look at your calls to action and how to get a better ROI, look at how to monetize and maybe to develop a sponsorship strategy if that's a fit for you. So if you have been struggling with your podcast, let's say, you're a business owner, you started your podcast, the whole idea was to use it as a business development tool for your business. You wanted to increase your visibility, thought leadership and subject matter expertise. If you're looking to have more visibility, more leads, more sales, getting more conversions back to your bottom line, now might be the time for you to consider investing in a podcast audit to really make sure that the foundations of your show are set up correctly, that the growth initiatives are in place, and that you can really strive to implement, in a lot of ways, some super simple tweaks that can really accelerate the growth of your show and then ultimately the growth of the revenues that are attached back to your business as a result of your podcast. And, I'm always saying, don't just take my word for it. Recently, we have had a lot of success with our clients who have invested in podcast audits with Produce Your Podcast. When we're doing the podcast, for example, again, we're setting you up for discoverability. We're looking at your external marketing and the ability to bring in new listeners. And we're also really diving into your content and how it's aligning with your business growth goals. And some really great success stories that have come out of our podcast audits recently are with clients who are seeing exponential growth, not only in downloads, but in conversions back to their business. One example is Jen Trepic, who is host of Salad with a Side of Fries. And we worked with her through a podcast audit, identified one new content creation segment. We like to refer to it as a secret sauce segment that we created for her. And then she saw an increase in downloads 20% or more right away, but then has also had this continuous piece of content that she can repurpose in her social media, on her website, and other areas to really bring awareness back to the Salad with a Side of Fries podcast. The Napier team, when we did their podcast audit, they were having so much success with their discoverability. That wasn't one of the challenges that we ended up identifying because they were really showing up well in search, which is one of the things that we focus on in the podcast audit, not just how you think you're showing up, but how your audience is finding you, but how is the new people that are looking for your show and your content and the type of content you're putting out there, how are they searching for podcasts in that content category? So they were doing great in that area, A+, but we were able to implement a new strategy alongside their discoverability that they were then able to see a 50% increase in their downloads as soon as they implemented this new strategy that we concepted and executed alongside their team. And probably one of my most favorite success stories, because it's just tremendous and was so much fun to work on, is when we did the podcast audit for Profit First Nation, which is a podcast hosted by Danielle Mulvey. When we dug into her podcast and the Profit First podcast, there were a lot of challenges that were based around discoverability. They had an amazing show with amazing content, but people weren't finding the show. And we went in as a result of the podcast audit. And one of the things that we did was that we updated their titles and their show descriptions for each of the podcast episodes and their actual show description itself, and made it a little bit more SEO friendly. Once those changes, along with the other changes that we recommended as a result of the audit, were implemented, they experienced an increase of, wait for it, 16,390 downloads in a window of less than 8 days. That in itself is amazing. But what's even more amazing about it is that that was an 80% increase in their overall downloads for that time frame. It also represented, I am not kidding you when I say this, it also represented 30% of their year-to-date downloads from January until June. That number represented 30% of their total year-to-date downloads occurred within that 8-day window. And it also kicked them over the 300,000 download mark, all as a result of the very practical and tactical strategies that we implemented for them as a result of the podcast audit. So if you feel like that your podcast could be growing more, could be getting you a better ROI on the investment that you're spending on it, if you feel like that you're stagnant or you're stuck or you just don't really know where to go next with your podcast, I would love it if you wanted to reach out and just talk about what the possibilities are in doing a podcast audit for your show so that we can get you these same amazing results that we were able to get for these other business growth focused podcasts. We know it's possible, and we want to make that possible for you.